A couple things that I want to talk about a little bit before we get into our presentation of this year's rules changes, and that is a trend that have really been seen just the last couple of years, and I'm going to title it "Respecting the Game." I just see our kids especially are starting to talk a lot more, and I know that they, with all the opportunities to watch the different games now on TV and especially the NBA. If you've watched an NBA game in the last few years, every single call, it seems like, is questioned. And unfortunately, I think that's starting to filter down to our level. I've seen more and more kids palms up, talking to officials, actually, in my opinion, showing up officials sometimes, and nothing being called. If you watch the college game a little closer, they don't put up with that, and they'll tee it right away, and that is really a stance that we have to take. So coaches, it really needs to start with you first, and that is teaching the kids about worrying about things they can control. They have no control over the officials, and they shouldn't be worrying about it, but officials, we have got to get that back under control. I just think that it's continuing to get worse, and I just think it shows a lack of respect for the game, and so I'm hoping that both coaches and officials will work on this together and get that back under control, and let's have the kids just play the game like it's supposed to be. The other thing that as we evaluate each year a little bit, and we look at things, the thing that we've noticed the last couple of years again is we really have a lot of body checking. That's one of the reasons we do have a third official with our three-man crews. That off-ball stuff that's going on should be able to be called more consistently. And so as players, even without the ball, as they're cutting through the key and those types of things, and we've got some illegal body checking going on, or if the cutter's illegally pushing as they go through, those types of things I really think need to be called so that we can clean it up. Last year we talked about the bump on the protecting the shooter, and that the defense using their hips and maybe bellies in some cases to knock that kid off balance. I thought some of that was better last year, so we just need to continue to improve on that. So those two areas I'd like to see, at least from the Wyoming standpoint, improve this year, and let's get the respect of the game back where it needs to be. The National Federation, I think as most of you know, they are the organization that we belong to, and see if I can get that out of there. Okay. This is the 100th year anniversary of the Federation, and so they will continue to be the leader in writing rules for all of our sports that they do at this time. We talk about this each year, but just as a reminder, there is a review committee, a rules review committee, that these are the national administrators. They serve on this committee, and basically not that they will give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the rule changes that basketball committee is looking at, but they want to make sure that the language is consistent and that one of the sports isn't going off in a direction that wouldn't be consistent with the others. We do have an option for you to purchase the rules book as an ebook. It is $6.99, and they have access to both types of books depending on what your phone is. And then the other one that I think has really become a good resource for our officials especially, but that is an app that they have now, and you can go on there, and by us being what we call 100% state, all of our officials are members of the NFHS Officials Association, and so you can get this free. If you have any issues as you try and get it, get a hold of Lana, and she'll be able to walk you through that, but it is an app that I use quite a bit, especially when I'm on the road. Coaches, if you belong to the NFHS Coaches Association, then it would also be free to you, but most of you are not members of that, but if you join that, it would be a free app as well. The rules this year, there's really very few again. I think the committee continues to think that the game is in a good good position where it's at, but there's always a few things that come up, and a lot of them have to do with manufacturers a lot of times, and so that's what we start with. So in order to address some of the concerns, they have come back and with the definition of actually a legal game ball, so that they can talk about the pebbled surface, the horizontal panels, and what would be a legal ball. One of the things that is starting to happen is there's becoming a lot of different colored balls. We haven't really seen that I'm aware of, at least in Wyoming, but these are the only 3 balls, and they've got the numbers there. Those numbers on the right side, those coincide with what the manufacturers know to make it that particular color. And then the logo, the NFHS logo, has to be on the basketballs in order for them to be eligible game balls. And so I think there's just getting to be more different types of balls showing up, and so they felt like coming back and reminding people. We have noticed in some of our games we have actually caught some balls that didn't have the logo on it. That is an illegal game ball, and so just make sure that you, from an administrator standpoint, coaches, you have all legal balls. Here's one that hopefully you have not purchased. We did send out an email last spring when we found out about this. This would be one example of an illegal ball. It's called the Nike Hyper Elite, and basically it's more like a golf ball with the divots, and it's not the pebbled surface that they talk about in that definition. So if you have this, hopefully you purchased it from a reputable supplier, and they will take that back. Nike is well aware that this is not a legal ball, but that isn't stopping them from making it. So as with all of our equipment, I really always recommend that you use, instead of going online and trying to get maybe a lower price, those online companies don't really worry about the rules and regulations. They just want to sell stuff. So our people in the state that sell the athletic equipment, they do a good job of standing behind that, and if you end up purchasing something that's not legal, they'll usually take it back and make it right for you. The second one that has come out here just in the last year, I guess, is called Shot Tracker, and basically it's to try and help analyze each player, and you can get some stats and those types of things. It is illegal in a game situation. So what it's made up of has a sensor inside the basketball, which therefore makes the basketball illegal for our contests. There are several companies that are already coming out with these, big companies like Nike and Spalding and Wilson and Under Armour. And from what we understand, Adidas and Molten and Baden, they're not too far behind in getting theirs. But what this ends up being is a ball that has a sensor in it. The players then wear a sensor, a lot of times on their shoestrings, I guess sometimes in the socks and wristbands. And then there's an anchor in the rafters that is reading all of this. And so the anchor itself, that's not against our rules, having anything up there. But if you wanted to utilize something like this in practice, that would be up to you. I would make sure that the sensors on the shoestrings and so forth are safe, so you're not getting kids hurt. But the sensors worn during a game would not be legal, nor would the ball with a sensor in it be legal. So not sure if you've heard of that or if you're using it, but it would not be legal in games. Okay, the first rule change is really one that we've talked about the last couple of years, and just seems to be a lot of confusion. So I think the committee this year did a good job of making this simpler, and that's the deflection. When we've had a ball that's deflected in the front court and goes into the back court, they've added an exception so that any player that's located in the back court can recover the ball deflected from the front court by the defense. So it didn't change the rule if it's a fumble off the offense and goes into the back court. That can't be the first person to catch it, as the same as in the past. But this one last year, if you remember, since the ball had not touched the back court yet, it still had front court status, and so that would have been an over and back. And now with the exception, since the defense has deflected the ball, it wouldn't matter as long if a player, whoever, retrieves that in the backcourt. If it's the other offensive player, that would be illegal, and we don't have to worry about whether the ball has had front court or back court status as long as it's deflected off of the defense. And so this one here, shows the same thing with the backcourt status, the deflection. This one in the past would have been legal anyway. It was already legal because the ball had established backcourt status, and then once that happens, anybody can recover it. So hopefully that'll simplify it. I don't think this happens a lot anyway, but the difference would be if it's deflected by a defense, you can recover it either way now, or in the past, it could only be this when the ball had backcourt status. The second rule that they talk about is 440. That's in our definitions, and basically it's just, again, reminding you about a legal guarding position and or a legal screen, and that the screener has to be in bounds with a legal position. So in this picture here, this would be a legal screen. She is in bounds on the black team there. Number 12 is in bounds, has her feet in bounds, and so that would be a legal screen. Where this picture here is showing that this would be an illegal screen, which would then, therefore, since she's not in legal guarding position, since she's off the court, it becomes illegal contact and it's a foul on the screener. So I think we know that, but again, it's just a reminder. The other reminder along those lines would also be if a player is leaving the court illegally. I have seen that a little bit more where kids running the baseline, or they come across, they're setting a block-to-block screen and they run out of bounds as they come across that. Remember, that's just a violation now. It's not a technical anymore like it used to be. So those are really the only two rule changes that they've talked about. I think the deflection will help and clear up some confusion that maybe we've had in the past on that. The committee did spend a lot of time on the points of emphasis in a couple of different areas. The first one, the area they really have looked at is sports medicine. We do have a national sports medicine committee that does make recommendations to all of the different sports. Obviously, concussions has been a focus in all of our contact sports, and basketball is considered a collision and contact sport. So basically, this is just a reminder to go back and make sure that you're using the best practices in your concussion management. We have purchased a concussion insurance for all of our kids in the state of Wyoming. So if you do have an athlete, coaches, that does get a concussion, we have those forms on our website, and it's been very helpful to the parents and students that have had to use it. There's also a concussion course that's online. We have that on the main page of our website that you can link to, and it is a free course, and I think a lot of you use that for your state law requirement of concussion management. From the official standpoint, if you observe someone that you believe possibly would have signs of concussions, and that's all you really need to have. In this picture, the official is informing the coach that 15 had hit her head on the knee of a player while going for the loose ball, and she needs to be checked because she's showing signs of a concussion. We need to remove that player from the contest when that happens. Officials, you're not expected to play a medical role. You're not diagnosing anything. You just, when they show signs, you have them removed, and then they would go through this protocol. Each one of you should have a return to play protocol at your school district. This heads up one is pretty common. Obviously, we're going to remove the athlete from play, and then that athlete needs to be evaluated by an appropriate healthcare professional. Most of the time, that professional may not be at the site, especially if it's a lower level game. Parents should be informed that they're showing possible signs of a concussion, and then that athlete should not return until they have been cleared by an appropriate healthcare professional. If there happens to be a doctor on site and they go through the protocol with them, from the official standpoint, if that athlete returns, okay, then you're expecting or assuming then that they have actually been checked and that they've been allowed to get back in. Coaches, you are not allowed to be the person that clears them to put them back in without having that appropriate healthcare professional check that. So let's just make sure that, again, if when in doubt, we sit them out. Obviously, this is a game, and that's all it is a game, so we want the safety of the kids to be first. Research has shown that, the recognitions of those symptoms, the quicker that we can take care of those, then the quicker that they will actually recover and come back and be able to play. So from that standpoint, let's just keep the safety of those kids in mind. We've seen a few, especially on the girls' side, it seems like some of them want to wear this soft headgear. We have allowed that. There's really no evidence that it prevents concussions, but from our standpoint, if they wear them, as long as they're not hard or something that we would think could create an injury to themselves or others, they will be allowed to be worn. Really, from the coaches and officials standpoint, if we would try and eliminate the rough play, and that would help us as much minimize those concussion risks as anything else. So those are some of the concussion points that they wanted to emphasize this time. From a sports medicine, the injury, again, just following the protocols on that. We've, I think, spent enough time on that. So ankle sprains, we get a report every year, the committee does. I'm not on that committee anymore, but the committee gets a report from the sports medicine group that does do a lot of testing throughout the nation on different injuries that happen in each sport. Ankle sprains continue to be the #1 most common injury in basketball. And so what the committee has recommended, the sports medicine committee has recommended to the basketball committee, is that a lot of these actually could be prevented. And there's a simple series of exercises, and they have proven that with ankle braces and with these exercises that you can actually eliminate 50 to 60% of all ankle sprains in high schools. And so we would recommend that you take a look at those. There's a lot of different things that are out there with just simple 5 to 10 minutes 3 times a week, and would basically help just kind of warm up, strengthens the lower leg, strengthens the ankle, and then with the use of those lace-up braces, they do not. There's a lot of, I guess, false information out there. At the end of this slide here, it talks about wearing ankle braces does not affect an athlete's speed or agility, nor do they weaken the ankles or lead to other injuries. So this is really just more of a kind of a reminder as coaches' education, something to help your athletes and talk about. And here's a slide just talking about working through proper warm-ups and exercises to try and eliminate injuries. The other one is, and we do run into this sometimes, and again, just a reminder of our universal precautions. If we do have blood, and the athlete does need to leave the activity. So we're not going to, if it's something that's just quick and we can get it right back in, that's one thing. But until that bleeding stops, that athlete can't come back in, or until it's covered up, or if the uniform's changed. But we're not going to hold up the game for 5 minutes while we run around trying to find another jersey or those types of things. The other reminder is if they do have to remove the jersey, that needs to be done outside of the court. We don't just take the jersey off on the playing surface or in front of the bench. We need to get back into a locker room or out of the spectator's view and change that. Again, simple reminders as far as cleaning the uniform or playing surface. Make sure you're wearing gloves and use those universal precautions that all of you have gone through. And then we need to clean that surface with a disinfectant. And then any blood exposure, if there's been a bite or something that ripped through the skin, then we need to have that student removed immediately until that can get taken care of. Probably the one that we see sometimes that should be removed more, and that is with blood on the uniform. We need to have that player removed. They need to either get it cleaned, or remember, you can change uniforms and you can change numbers. And we would also allow then to make that change in the scorer's book so that there would be no penalty for that. But again, if they're going to take that uniform off, they need to be out of sight. This one just talks about, again, the responsibility for the uniform and apparel. We believe that we really have simplified this process with all of the sleeves and leggings and everything else that are being worn, that you know, manufacturers, we all know that's how they make money. They continue to try and find new things, and so we don't know what we're going to come up with each year. But the committee is still concerned with the number of improper uniforms and adornments and accessories and those types of things. So again, really this comes down to this is a coach's requirement. And what I don't like seeing, from my opinion after being on the committee, this to me is kind of the final step of a warning to coaches. Officials, it's your responsibility to ask the coaches, the head coach before the game, if their kids are properly attired and in legal uniforms. If they say yes and then put in a kid with an illegal uniform, then that should be a technical. At that time, we're trying to be as proactive as we can. We just as soon have the official or the coaches take care of it instead of the officials having to be the ones to take care of that. And so coaches, spend some time on making sure you understand the rules of what's legal and not legal with sleeves and undergarments, those types of things, because that is your role. And then teach those kids. Officials, we want you to be proactive as much as you can during the warm-ups and those types of things. And if you see something that is a very simple fix, then you can address the kid. Otherwise, our recommendation is you go to the coach during those pregame warm-ups and have them take care of that. I think the more we can communicate on this, and then it can be taken care of. The issue is the violations can't be ignored. We need to address it. We've spent enough time on that. And if it's not possible to take care of it again, and we've asked that head coach about being properly equipped, then that needs to be a technical. And remember, that is a direct technical on the head coach, and it then loses also the coach's box on that. This last statement is just, you know, that we realize again it's difficult to stay in front of some of the things that keep changing, but the rules are very clear, and we think we've simplified them again to try and make it simple for kids and coaches to understand. So here's an example of the first two in A and B. Those are legal undershirts because they only have one manufacturer's logo. And remember, we changed that last year to allow that so that it would simplify it again and be consistent. You can see in B, you're allowed one logo on the jersey plus a logo on the undershirt, but in C, that one would be illegal, and that would come down to, because it has two logos on the undershirt. So again, let's make sure we know what those rules are. Let's start it right from the beginning of the year, and it shouldn't be an issue. In picture C there, if we have 3 or 4 kids with that, it's still only one technical. If we get to the point where we're going to have to enforce the technical, we would only apply one technical to the head coach, and again, they would lose the coaching box because that is direct. In this one, we have the coach being proactive. On the left, we have the kid obviously with the red sleeve on, and he's telling the team that they're wearing white, you need to remove that. If the official sees it again before we can get out there, by informing the coach, let's get it taken care of. And again, to me, this is a simple thing, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be. So these POEs that they've just talked about are really just some reminders on safety of our athletes, and then, again, trying to clean up the illegal uniforms. The other point of emphasis that they went into was just a few of the rules that they identified. They had 3 different areas that they wanted to look at. You know, again, looking at our skill level at the high school level, we just need to be reminded that some of the things we see again on TV aren't legal at our game, and so sometimes we need to make sure we don't get caught up in that because we hear about it all the time on the ESPN commentators or whatever, and so we don't want to duplicate some of those other levels. And so the first one is just going back to traveling, very basic, obviously, rule that we've had forever. And in determining that, especially for us, we just need to go back and remind ourselves and read those rules on the pivot foot. I think with, sometimes things look funny. The Euro step's kind of the big thing that's come in, and the Euro step, if it's done correctly, is a legal move. It's not a travel, but sometimes because it looks like a travel, we call that, and then other times when they actually have traveled, we don't call that. So I think we know after coming to a stop, if you establish a pivot foot, that pivot foot can't be lifted until you've passed the ball or put the ball on the floor or have shot a goal, try for goal. So we're just trying to look at consistency on this. I think knowing the rules will better allow you to officiate it and make sure that we're being accurate. Probably the biggest one that we see, this one obviously is your basic jump stop. We come down on both feet. We can use either foot as a pivot foot. I think we all know that. Where we need to make sure that we're being accurate with the call, if in the second picture there, number 3, if her right foot is her pivot foot, she's taken the left step already. If she were to lift the right foot and take that step before she puts the ball on the floor, that's probably the one I see the most that is not called when that pivot foot comes up before the ball is put down. So just again, a point of emphasis that they think, and this is nationwide, that they get these recommendations from, so we're not the Lone Ranger seeing this. The second one is instead of coming to a jump stop, they come down on one foot first and then the other foot, so obviously the first foot that landed would be the pivot foot, and then the same rules would apply for the travel. The second one is legal guarding position, both for block charge, screening, verticality, some of those types of things. And although, again, these are fundamental, we talked last year a little bit about the legal guarding position. Once it's established, then the defense can adjust to absorb the contact or react to the play. I think the biggest thing is when they have established that legal guarding position, they can move. They can move laterally as long as they're not the ones coming into the offensive player and creating the contact. They do not have to be set and not moving when that contact occurs in order for it to be a charge. Seeing if there's anything else here that, again, just so they're not moving forward. On this one, they're again talking about the offense, having enough room. If there's less than 3 feet of space, the dribbler really has the greater responsibility for the contact. And if the player does not have the ball yet, then obviously we need to give them the room to catch the ball. And again, I'm just going to have you review those rules and look through that. If an opponent's airborne, remember that they have to have established the legal guarding position before that opponent looked at or left the ground. And so again, these are just reminders. It's important, I think, officials, that each year you go back through, coaches as well, and make sure you know those rules. There's a lot of video now that's out there. We have Arbiter, and I'll talk a little bit later. We've also had at the NFHS Learn, they've put some more videos on there, and those are all free to our officials. And so sometimes it's easier to look when you can see a video and see what's being talked about. Here's what we talked about earlier. The number 3 has established a legal guarding position facing the opponent. As the number 4 starts to dribble in, 3 has moved sideways or laterally to go over to keep that position. That would be legal. And if contact is made, 4 is the one that's creating that contact, and that's going to be a charge. Verticality, I think we all know about that. Again, 3 has the right to be able to leave their feet as long as they jump straight up and straight down. In this case, if 4 were to step forward, dip a shoulder, or create the contact, then they would be, again, the one initiating that contact, and so that foul needs to be called. And then the last reminder, as far as from that rules point of view, is just the loose ball. Again, trying to clean the game up with the contact. We talked about concussions a little bit earlier. This is an area where concussions can certainly happen because we got a lot of heads down in the same area. And so we're trying to eliminate the excessive physical contact during a loose ball. So that's the focus of this, and prevent situations that then can escalate and get much worse. Officials, you need to concentrate on the possession of the ball. where the player's being obstructed from their path, trying to get to that loose ball, and then was there piling on. The kid can't just come because the ball's loose and jump on top. Remember the difference, if an offensive player the fumble's an accidental loss of the player control, and once that happens, they have the right to go back and gain that control. Distance is really not a factor when you recover the ball, but if they dive for the ball and get control of it, and their momentum causes them to slide, then the sliding is not a violation. Okay, so again, we're kind of back to traveling here. It doesn't matter how much they slide, as long as once they come to a stop, they're allowed to sit up if they happen to be on their back. Now, if they're on their stomach when they recover that, they cannot roll over, and in either case, whether they're on their back or their stomach, they cannot try and rise from the floor while they're holding the ball, otherwise that would be a violation. The defender trying to recover the ball really has it from the player in possession. They have the responsibility to avoid the contact. What we see a lot of times is sometimes that player on the floor is fouled 2 or 3 times after they've got possession, just trying to get rid of the thing, and it's not being called. So we want that illegal contact call. This talks again about opponents diving on top, and we've got to get that foul called. We also know that incidental contact is part of our game, and so judgment does come in place. But however, it's not incidental contact when someone knocks someone out of the way trying to get to that loose ball, whether they roll on top, those types of things. And again, the player who gains possession on the floor, we've talked about, is a lot of times fouled several times before a held ball is called. Few of the past situations show that in some cases we've called a held ball maybe too quickly. So again, that judgment comes in, but sometimes we'll call it a jump ball and then we ignore the foul that is happening. So again, we want that contact eliminated in those situations. This is trying to show that picture of piling on, coming in there. I don't know if it does a great job with that, but that was the intent. In summary then, just reviewing the pivot foot, legal guarding, proper uniform, loose ball recovery. This is going to allow for a consistent understanding by players and coaches and consistent application by our officials. If we do that, I think it cleans the game up a lot, and it eliminates a lot of things that can make for escalation then as the game goes on. One of the things that, especially from the official standpoint, that we really recommend is getting into the casebook. It's important to know the rules, but the rules obviously aren't going to spell out, not that the casebook spells out every situation, but they have over the years established a lot of good history and situations that have come up that will help you. So we really encourage you to get into that casebook. Coaches, a lot of times that's a great reference point for you as well. The last point of emphasis really focuses on the official, but I'm going to take it to the coaches as well, and that's just the professionalism. We talked about respecting the game, especially from the kids. I think our coaches, in my opinion, have been better overall. I think maybe allowing the coach's box to be extended has helped that a little bit, but one of the things that in teaching officiating and in the classes that are taught around the nation, one of the things they really emphasize is your terminology. And it's hard, again, because of everything we hear on TV, but using proper terminology and being able to address situations in a professional manner can really set a good tone. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but as you go through your officials' books and you look at that, our terminology in our book is backboard. It's not glass. It's a division line. It's not midcourt or a timeline. It's the end line. It's not the baseline, and so on, as you can see through. So we're encouraging you to look through that. You officiate the game. You don't manage it. We request a timeout, those types of things. But using that terminology does set a professional perception out there, and a lot of times once we can set that perception, it really does make a difference in how the game is managed and takes it to a little bit higher plane there. In this pictures here, the example of the official talking to the coach, again using that proper terminology. He did not have legal guarding position because he stepped on the end line. That is not backcourt violation because her foot never crossed the division line. But this is where I would also talk with coaches. I think our officials do a pretty good job overall. All of us we realize it's an intense game and we get emotions on both sides sometimes. But coaches, I think it's important for you to also, when you ask those questions or if you need a clarification, that you use professionalism. Sometimes we let our emotions get the best of us. I hear comments and things yelled at officials, you know, you're terrible, or that was terrible. That's the worst call I've ever seen. You shouldn't be officiating. I guess I would ask you, how many times has an official run by your bench and said, that is the worst coaching move I've ever heard. That was terrible. What are you doing? Do you teach your kids anything? You know, that type of thing is really, it can't just be one-sided. The professionalism needs to be both ways. And again, I think we overall do a pretty good job, but if we handle it that way, it just makes for a better game. From an official standpoint, your uniform is critical. Being neat and well-groomed, I think that instantly gives you more credibility as you take the floor, both with coaches, players, and the crowd. You can see wearing proper and only legal uniforms as an official as well. And keeping in mind that your professionalism is always on display. Sometimes we have a timeout or something like that, and we get into, you know, we've got a close game, and all of a sudden we've got some officials talking to someone in the crowd, or they're joking with each other, and it just takes that professionalism away from it. So we want all interactions, whether you're talking to a coach or to each other, to be professional. And the old saying that they have there on the last line is, you know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. As we do get into conversations, a level tone is very important, I think, as you get into that. Sometimes I realize it escalates, but that's what we're trying to do, is keep a level tone. And by doing that, I think it maintains a good game atmosphere. And again, it helps us manage those games and just be a better experience for everyone involved. And again, especially for the kids. And that's really what we're here for. As we mentioned earlier, you know, all interactions for both coaches and officials should be professional. And officials, you can be the calming force in an intense situation with the way you handle that. So again, just a reminder, the last page here, it just talks about having an administrator. We require an administrator or designee to be at every one of our contests. Now I know, I'm sure at some of our lower level games that might not always be the case. Head coaches, you need to know that if you do not have a person, you then become that go-to person, and we would just as soon not have that be the case. We want to know where that person is going to be at. If we do have to get in a situation where we've got fans out of control or those types of things, we want the officials going to the administrator or the designee, not going up and dealing with the fans themselves. We would rather have you stop the game and delay the game until it gets taken care of, instead of getting in a verbal confrontation with the fans and people in the stands. So create that positive relationship when you first get there. Make sure that both of you are on the same page, and I think we'll have, again, good contests. Kids are our focus, and that's, I want to just keep bringing it back to this. This is a game. Sometimes we lose our perspective, but I think if everyone just stays in their lane and coaches coach and the officials let them officiate. So coaches, you don't need to be officiating. The officials won't coach your team. And if we can get our fans to be supporting and positive, then it just makes it a good high school experience. So those are the points of emphasis. Again, a reminder of some of the officials education that is out there. We do have on NFHSlearn.com. All of these courses are on there. Last year we had officiating basketball, you can see on the left side there, and that class is free for you being a member of our association. I believe. And then the future course that's coming up on the right side, they're hoping to have it out. I don't know if it'll be out before the end of the season. If it is, we'll certainly let you know, but that's going to be on 3-person mechanics. There is for those of you that are new to the officiating or relatively new, if you haven't taken this class, this is just talks about some of those basic things we just covered about professionalism and just the art of officiating, and a lot of different things that can be applied to any sport depending on what you're doing. Again, this course is free to any of our Officials Association members, and I would highly encourage you to take a look at that. Again, most of those other classes are about 20-25 minutes. This one's a little bit longer, but again, it's only 30 to 45 minutes it takes to complete. One of the things that they've increased this year, again, this is on NFHSlearn.com. You would have to register. It's free to register, but they have added a video library. And so where you see at the top there where it says NFHS Learn for You, you would click on that and Officials shows up. They have a Coaches tab, an Officials tab, an Administrators tab, and so forth. Click on that, and then you would be able to filter through your sports. You can see one of the first videos they highlight there is some court coverage and talking about the trail official there on the one on the top right. They do have a lot of good videos on there, and they have added some of those points of emphasis that we talked about. The other place that is a good reference is at Arbiter in the Central Hub. Select your sport of basketball. They, again, have lots of video. You can pull up different parts of, if you want to just look at traveling, they've got clips on that. If you want to just look at block charge, they have videos on that. So a couple of great resources for officials to be able to continue to improve. As we look at that learning center, it's not only just for officials. You can see this is the areas. It really has turned into a professional development, and they've done, I think, a great job of offering a lot of free courses, which is nice. But there's things there for all of those different groups. Some of the free courses, again, the concussion course is one of the main ones, I think, but there's a sportsmanship course on there. Sudden cardiac arrest, that's an important one for those of us that are getting a little older, to make sure that we know how to handle that. But the other ones that I think from a coach's standpoint, you know, the bullying, hazing, they just put a new one on here in the last month that talks about abuse and how to handle those situations. You know, if you were to get into a situation similar to a Michigan State or those types of things, you know, what should we do? What are our responsibilities? How do we handle those types of things? So again, most of these are going to be 20 to 30 minutes max, but they do a good job, I think, of speaking at our level and are very pertinent to today's world. As far as the NFHS network, we continue to have more and more of our high schools joining what they call the school broadcast program on the network. And so their goal by 2020 is to try and have every high school event in America being streamed on the network. Currently, this is the states that are in yellow are the states that do belong to the network. So if you have relatives that have kids in any of those other states and you're by a membership to the network, you would be able to view those games as well as any of ours. We are planning on streaming again all of our state championship games, but we will also be streaming several of the regional tournaments now that we have schools that are part of that broadcast program. So we think it's turned into a better thing. If you haven't seen the Pixelot camera yet, it's an HD quality. It really, I don't know exactly how it works. It follows the ball, it moves with it, but it really does a good job. And so that's why a lot of our schools are starting to do that. And the benefit to that is now you can film every freshman middle school game if you want, but freshman, JV, sophomore, depending on the levels that you have to play in your gym, basically anything that goes on. The other option that they have, you can view it from your phones and the mobile devices that you have, and I have watched some of those with very, very clear picture and good quality. So as a reminder to our head coaches and officials, you need to follow this at the end, and after you've viewed it, you got to complete the Google Doc. Assistant coaches, if you've been on here, that's great, or if you're a middle school coach, that's great, but you do not need to. Please don't complete it. It just creates confusion, apparently. But click on the link in the description of the video, and then it's also available on our website as well. You enter your name, and then you choose whether you're an official or you're a head coach. If If you have any issues with that at all, then make sure you get a hold of Scott McCash at our office, and he'll be able to walk you through that. Do not call me on that one, because you're not going to get the right answer anyway. So, as always, if you have any other questions on the rules or whatever, do feel free to give me a call. And I want to wish everybody a great year, and let's really show a lot of respect for the game with our kids and professionalism from the adult level, and I think it will continue to be a great game. Thank you, and appreciate your attendance.